Hi everybody, and welcome back to Attack of the Great Pile. Today, I'm going to be addressing the lack of artillery for my Tyranids. So let's go ahead, sit on down, and get into it. Let's go! I'm starting off this model here, primed, ready to go for the base colors. Right now I'm going to be airbrushing a red on top of the carapace so as to expedite the process and limit the amount of brush strokes that can be seen on the final product. Doing this will save me a lot of time and headache later on down the road. As you can see, I'm taking a considerable amount of care here, avoiding the outermost edges of the armor so that then I don't have overspray of red wind up on the black skin tone of the model. It's okay if some of it spills over, as it will, but it's easy enough for me to go and touch it up later down the road, and it's worth it to save the time on the project overall to airbrush it now. While I've got you, might as well talk about the subject a little bit. So we're painting a Tyrannofex, one of the largest creatures in the Tyranid faction. It's one of the craziest models that I've seen as well, and immediately called out to me as like, I need to paint this. It's a nuts looking model. It's got a lot of detail to it, which I really appreciate. And honestly, I thought it would be a great addition to my collection. I am building a Kronos Hive Fleet, and primarily they use long-ranged attacks, so it was a no-brainer to add an artillery unit. I'm going back and touching up the red. What I'm doing here is I'm using a watered down application of Corn Red. What this will do for me is it will help keep the blotchy, sort of spotty finish down to a minimum, and it'll help tie this coat of red in better with that base coat of red that I applied earlier with the airbrush. This will also allow me to chase out the details and get to the far edges of the armor without having to worry quite so much about having too much shadow on it right now. I'll be the first to tell you, this model is going to fight back. There's so many spikes and sharp points on it. Honestly, it felt like I was trying to paint a still living Alaskan king crab. Really, I was considering putting some gloves on for it. Now it's time to do the same thing to the head. What we're going to do is we're going to start painting the carapace on the head in Corn Red, and then after that we can start highlighting some of the other details on the head. As I'm just about finishing up the carapace on the head, I'm not going to extend too far up the nose horn. What I want to try and do is create a gradient between the red and the black of the horn. It's really going to show up better when I start to highlight the edges of the horn in sort of a blue-gray, and then a mid-tone gray, and then a highlight bright tone gray. Here you can see the head isn't short of any details. There's plenty to do here when it comes to picking out details and highlighting certain things, and I'm going to try and maximize that to the best of my abilities. Now I'm applying Dawnstone Gray by dry brushing it onto the skin and the horns on the head of the model. This will help pick out those details that I was talking about earlier and will help set the tone for the rest of the model. For the eyes, tongue, and teeth, I'm going to be using contrast paints and a shade paint. For this to really take full effect, I need to lay down a bright base coat in the form of cold white to really make that color pop later on. As you can see, I'm doing my best to keep the paint on the teeth and not allow it to run into the gum line of the model. It's okay if it runs a little bit, but I really don't want it going too far, as when I apply this contrast and shade paint later, when that touches black paint, it almost disappears because there's almost nothing behind it to help create that gradient of color. While I allow the white paint on the head to dry, I'm going to start dry brushing an application of Asterath Red to the armor on the body. This is going to help highlight those edges and will help show them a bit better later on when I apply the Nuln Oil. It will really add some gradient to the armor. Ah yes, a close-up of my hand. Fantastic, isn't it? I do apologize. Now that the dry brushing of the brighter red is done, I can go back and start highlighting some of the other details on the head with Basalt Gray by Vallejo. What this will do is it'll help draw more attention to those details, and it'll really make it something interesting to look at when it's sitting on the table. So now I'm going to experiment with this paint a little bit. This is Citadel's contrast paint called Black Templar. What I want to try and do with it is differentiate the weapon ever so slightly from the rest of the Tyrannofex. The weapon is actually a different biological entity than the Tyrannofex itself, and they attach sort of like a symbiotic relation, and it's rather interesting how this all works out. If you really want to learn more about it, I highly recommend reading up on the lore, or maybe I could try and divulge more information on that. Leave a comment, let me know. Now I'm applying Thunderhawk Blue as a quick highlight using a dry brush method on the horn of the model. This will help really draw that gradient I'm looking for, as well as a few spots on the model such as the hooves and the scythe points of the forward arms. Now to paint the fissures in the skin and armor. For an example, I'm going to refer to my Termagant. These fissures on the Termagant are located here and here. Now, for the Tyrannofex, these positions are much larger and much more prevalent. There's something between 30 and 40 of these on this one individual model. I'm going to use that same Tyranid turquoise that I've been using on the rest of my Tyranid fleet, so that then it really creates a bright contrast from the red and black, as well as ties the model in with the rest of the Kronos Hive Fleet that I've been painting. Did someone say time skip? In all honesty, I did both of us a favor here. I think I spent probably 25 minutes chasing down all these fissures in the model to try and highlight. Once all of these are painted white, I can set the body aside and then start chasing the details on the head. Primarily, I'm going to start by painting the teeth with Agrak's Earthshade. That'll give me that really dark, grimy sort of color that I really want for those teeth. Now I can finally start applying that Tyranid turquoise that I've been wanting to apply almost all day. It's really taking an effect that I like on this model. It's popping the way I want, and it's really tying both sides of the armor and the skin tone together and contrasting at the same time. I'm really excited about this, and I can't wait to see the finished result. Now to paint the aptly named Stinger's elbows. These are located in the middle of the back, and they are sharp. I'll tell you what, I thought about sanding them off because I kept stabbing my thumb with them. Now I'm going to start highlighting some of the pockets of white on the weapon in Croxagor's scales. This is a slightly brighter turquoise, as I want to try and give it that sort of glowing effect compared to the rest of the model. I'll follow that up by painting the tongue and eyes in Pterodon turquoise. It's coming together. Now I'm going back and touching up the elbow and the tubing with the airbrush, hitting it with white and then following that up with Croxagor's scales. I really want to try and give it the appearance of something similar to a magazine for a weapon, feeding the weapon that blue bile that's being used as a chemical weapon. The base for this model is absolutely massive, so I'm going to try and fill some of that empty space with smaller miniatures and components. But first I have to try and map out how this model is going to sit on the base, so I'm using a pencil here to trace out where the feet contact, and then from there I can figure out what's dead space and what's occupied space on the base, and add miniatures to fill that void. I'm so glad I have extra bits. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and pick out an arm and a leg, and I'm going to put these on the base, but I'm going to cut them a little bit to look like they had been completely torn apart from the body. This will also help to add scale to the Tyrannofex and its overall size. Tyranids are absolutely vicious in close quarters combat, so I'm breaking the blade and I'm also separating the top half of the leg from these components. I want to try and make it look as though the Space Marine had no chance in close quarters. Now I can finally start adding a textured base paint to the base of the model. I'm going to be using Armageddon Dunes here. I'm not too worried about trying to get the arm and leg glued down. I'm going to be using super glue for those, but I want to try and leave two small pockets in the very back for the back legs of the model itself, as the model is quite heavy and I want to make sure it binds directly to the base. Now to add some realism, I'm using a technical paint called Blood for the Blood God by Citadel here to make it look like blood streaks and blood splatter across the model base. The space is a little bright, so I'm going to knock it down with some Nuln Oil. This will help tie it in with the grimdark sort of image that I'm trying to present with this model and the overall scene. I'm also applying the Nuln Oil to the arm and legs so that then they get tied into the base as well. Off screen, I'm applying sprue goo to the back of the head of the model, so that then it'll stick firmly into the neck socket of the model itself and shouldn't move too much while I'm trying to glue up the feet to apply to the base of the model. I'll be using sprue goo in a copious amount on the feet to ensure that it bites very strongly to the base. It's important to notice how your model wants to sit on the base. My model, unfortunately, is very nose heavy, so I'm having to use an additional base holder to support the model while the glue dries. While I'm allowing the glue to set up under the feet, I'm going to take advantage of this time and start applying Nuln Oil across the back of the model, especially on the armor. Might as well double use the time, just have to be sure not to move it too much so that the glue can actually bite. It's been a few hours since I applied the Nuln Oil and it's had time to set up, and I'm noticing some details I missed. So first I'm going to start painting the blade of the knife. I'm going to apply Basalt Gray to try and set down a base tone, and then follow that with some natural steel. While that's drying, I've noticed that a good chunk of the Blood for the Blood God on the leg has fallen off, so I need to reapply that, and I'm going to expand this puddle just a little bit. Once that's set up, I'm going back to the knife and applying bronze to try and add some contrast to the overall weapon itself. Once that's done, I'm going to start chasing some of these white spots that are showing up on the model that are unpainted areas, or spots that I missed, or perhaps maybe some areas where the paint may have run off because it was too thin. Now I'm going back and highlighting those uppermost edges of the horn, as well as the hooves and the scythe tips on the forward arms. What I'm trying to do here is really chase that sort of contrast that you see on cattle horns, where it's black at the base, and then it goes to a white or a brighter tone closer to the points. Once that's all set up, I'm going to apply Nuln Oil to the hooves to really try and tie that contrast in all together to make it look like a natural gradient. Painting the brim of the base of the model, I'll be using Vallejo's German Camo Dark Green. I'll apply it until I get the opacity that I want. This base still looks way too empty, so I'm going to start applying some grass tufts using super glue. Apply them where you feel they fit most naturally, and generally that'll work out best. You'll see here that on the larger section of the grass tuft, it's raising up in a certain spot, and I can't seem to get it to sit down right, so I go back with the texture paint and apply that along the seam where it keeps trying to rise up to try and help sell the realism behind this scene. And then I'll touch that up again with Nuln Oil to tie that in to the overall scene. Here I've noticed a complete accidental application of white, so I'm going back with a very thinned down corn red, and I'll apply this in a few applications until I get the consistency that I want, and then I'll cover that with the Nuln Oil to tie it in with the rest of the armor. And there you have it, everybody. There's a Tyranid Tyrannofex painted up and ready to go to join the rest of my Kronos Hive Fleet. Sorry, no fancy turntable exit today, as unfortunately the turntable is currently occupied with another project that I'm working on. Thank you again for joining me, and please consider subscribing, liking, or leaving a comment down below. I would really appreciate it, as I'd like to have some feedback so I know where to take this channel in the future. Thank you again, and I hope y'all have a great day.